Morning guys, I'm Dave Canterbury with Self-Reliance Outfitters in the Pathfinder School, back in the third part of our series in the shadow of Nessmuk. And what I wanted to kind of look at today was, I want to kind of take his sheltering mentality as far as carrying lightweight shelter materials and kind of cross-reference that with today's ultralight hiker and kind of look at what's called in today's terms the big three. And the big three is your shelter system, your sleep system, and your backpack. And those are really the major places that you can reduce weight other than hunting and fishing equipment. Set that aside for a minute. And then food, which is an expendable, set that aside. But the heaviest weights in your pack are generally going to be your pack itself, your sleep system, and your shelter. So if you can reduce the weight of those three items right out of the gate and get good versatility in that system, then you've got half the battle beat. So one of the things that I've been working on is trying to figure out, I see having three options really for sheltering. A hammock setup similar to the way this one is now, a tarp setup similar to the way this one is now to sleep on the ground directly with a sleep pad underneath you. You then could sleep in a hammock, lift the tarp up, put a hammock across two trees, and then you'd have to have an underquilt, overquilt. Of course, on the ground, you're gonna need an overquilt. And then the third option being what you saw in the last two videos I shot, which is a tent, the Z-Pax duplex tent. And when you look at these sheltering systems, they're not that much different in weight, to be honest with you. And we'll talk about some of those weights here in a minute. I don't want to be too much of a weight weenie with this whole series, but it is really about, in the shadow of Nessmuk, and he was an ultralight guy, and he listed the weights of all the things in his gear as he was going. So we're going to talk a lot about weight. But I don't want you to get too hung up on that and think, oh, Dave's trying to measure grams. I'm really not. I'm just trying to stay under a certain total weight in the end. And this is the means to that end, is reducing the weight of certain items along the way. So we're starting with the big three. Now, before we get into the whole sheltering thing, let's talk about packs for a minute. The pack I had in the last video that I showed was a Fjällräven hunting pack, the Freeluft 45, and it is 4 pounds-ish all by itself with nothing in it. So you're looking at a 4 pound pack. Now, while it is a good pack and it held everything I wanted it to hold, no problem, just held everything I wanted it to hold for, enough food for 3 to 5 days. The problem with that pack is, in my mind, is it's a dedicated hunting style pack. My end goal is really not to go hunting. It is to hunt for food to subsidize what I have, or to fish for food to subsidize what I have for enjoyment, not because I have to do it or have to have it. So kind of back to that whole binoculars conversation. Do I really need a dedicated hunting pack for that? Or can I lighten the load a little bit right off the bat by going with a different pack style? And so one of the packs that I'm looking at currently is the Helicon Summit. And I like this pack because it is very similar in the way it's set up as far as how it is designed to what ultralight thru hikers use nowadays. It's basically one bucket style. It's a 40-liter pack, but it's basically one giant bucket that you can stuff your things into. It's got a couple of advantages over the normal bucket style pack in that you can also, it has a top pocket here that you can access for immediate needs. And we'll discuss what's in these packs down the road a little bit more. And then it also has the ability in the front here to access it through a main zipper that goes straight down the middle of it. So you can access this pack a couple different ways, but it has the typical bikini bra on the front of it to put stuff in that you need to get to right away. A couple water bottle pockets, nice straps, nice suspension system. It has pockets on the belt that you can put things in for immediate access as well. And it has a nice aerating back pad in here as well. Okay, now this pack, empty, I weighed it and it is 2.3 pounds. Big difference right off the bat. You're cutting 2 pounds off of your total weight of your big three, as it were, right off the bat by changing backpacks. Question is 40 liters big enough? Well, so far it has been. I've loaded this thing up with everything I need in this weather condition, this time of year. So temperatures down around 25, 26, and 3-4 days worth of food with water That's total weight I'm talking about right now. Total weight without a fishing rod or without hunting gear, right at 20 pounds. That's exactly what I was shooting for. So I've still got to play with some things and tweak some things, but that's what this video series is all about. So let's just talk about the pack itself. 2 pounds, 2.3, 2.4 pounds. I've got another pack here that I'm looking at that I'm going to give a trial to, and this is very much like an ultralight hiker's pack. This pack, by the way, is made out of Cordura and nylon. This is like a ripstop, grid stop type nylon, and it's by One Tigris. This is an Amazon pack. This thing's like $80 on Amazon. I think this pack runs right at the $100 mark, maybe a little bit more. And this one's 89 bucks on Amazon. So they sent me this pack to trial. I want to beat it up and see if it's going to last. Right now, I'm just using it for a secondary shelter system. I've got the Hammock shelter system in this one, and I've got the shelter system, the Z-Pack shelter in this one. So I just carried this one down here for that reason. But this pack doesn't weigh in at much less than the Helicon pack, but it does have a little more room in it. It's probably at least 45 liters, I would say, just from the size differential between the two packs. So it does have a little more room in it, but I have not tested enough to see how durable it's going to be yet over time. That will come. So the pack, I've got that down, at least with the Helicon pack, knowing that I have drug it around a little bit, and I actually used one of these a little bit in Nevada and drug it around a little bit too when I was doing some photograph work for the upcoming catalog for Helicon out in Nevada. So I've got more confidence in this pack because I've used it a little bit more already. I haven't abused it yet. That's coming. But as far as weight goes, less than 2.5 pounds. Okay, that's A. Now, as far as the two shelter systems go, really, if you are going to sleep on the ground or if you're going to sleep in a tent, you're going to need a ground pad of some sort, okay? And ground pads, the thing about ground pads is what you're really looking for, striving for, checking for, trying to figure out when you're buying a ground pad, what you are looking at is what is the R value of that ground pad. In other words, what is its ability to be able to reduce the amount of heat loss you have through conduction with a surface like the ground, okay? And this is a Thermarest ground pad. I have two. I have the Thermarest that I've used quite a bit already. I actually have two of these. This is a Thermarest Neo Air. It is a blow-up heating pad or blow-up air pad. Now, what you really want to do with something like this is you're going to want to have something that you can put on the ground between this pad and the ground. Not because it's prone to get holes in it, but just for a little extra protection. If you are into Z-Pack's duplex, you have that built in because it has a bathtub in it. If you're going straight to ground, like underneath a tarp, you're going to need something like a piece of Tyvek. And this piece of Tyvek here is like 4 foot wide and 7 feet long, and it weighs, you know, probably less than 5-6 ounces, less than 5 or 6 ounces. So it weighs almost nothing to carry around with you, and it gives you a nice ground sheet you can put underneath a tarp system to put your sleeping pad on. Now, back to the R value. This Neo Air, if I remember right, has an R value of right around 3.5, somewhere in that neighborhood. To give you some kind of a reference point for what you need to stay warm, this would be a very good 3-season pad, all right? When you get into winter camping and you're not going to have any kind of a hot tent, a stove, anything like that, you may not even have a fire, you're just going to be sleeping with whatever sleep system you have, and this is going to be your ground pad, you're going to want something that has an R value of over 5, probably somewhere around the 5.5 mark. And for that, I have a different ground pad that is an Exped ground pad. And the Exped ground pad is a little thicker than this. It's actually square instead of tapered like this one is. And it has an R value over 5. You see, I didn't quite get all the air out of this one the last time I packed it up. There we go. These stuffed down fairly small. The difference in the R value in the pads is really weight, okay? And everything comes down to weight with this stuff. This weighs 16 ounces, exactly 1 pound for the most part. The X-Bed weighs another ½ pound on top of that. Almost 2, actually. It weighs almost 2 pounds. It's like 1.78 pounds, I think, the last time I weighed it. So you're talking about almost double the weight, but a lot more protection from the ground if it gets really, really cold. Again, for 3 seasons, this is good enough. And you're talking 16 ounces. So this combined with whatever you're going to, like your Tyvek, and you're at less than 1.5 pounds. Combine that with your pack, and if it weighs 2 pounds, 2.5 pounds-ish, you're at 3-4 pounds, okay? You're still way down on the weight, okay? Now, the next part of this system comes down to, if I have got something I'm gonna put on the ground, I've got something that I'm going to sleep on top of. Any shelter system that you make requires 3 things: something to sleep on, something to sleep in, and something to sleep under, okay? So what's the in portion of this, okay? The in portion of this would be an overquilt or a sleeping bag. And again, the way you cut weight there is you go with an overquilt instead of a sleeping bag, okay? And an overquilt, the difference between a quilt and a bag, and I will show you, this is the overquilt that's made by hammockgear.com. This is a 0-degree ground overquilt. It could be used in a hammock too as an overquilt if you had a matching underquilt. This is a 0-degree overquilt. So it'll be good 3 seasons, 4 seasons, no problem. And with either one of the ground pads that I have, it will work fine. So it's multifunctional. I'd rather have it a little bit warmer, to be honest with you, than to not have it warm enough when I need it. So if it's going to be 60 or 70 during the day once in a while, but it's going to get down to 20s at night, I'm going to carry this every time, all the time. I also have an underquilt for my hammock and an overquilt. And the overquilt for my hammock, that is a 30-degree overquilt, which we'll talk about in a few minutes, can be used on the ground the same way this one is. So the difference here is, instead of having that full-on sleeping bag, what you have here is you have a down quilt that basically is opened up, and it has a zip-up foot box on it that cinches down with cinch cord here to close it up, so that you have something that your feet are enclosed into, and then it goes this way over the top of you. So it's just a quilt over the top of you. Really, if you're sleeping in a sleeping bag, the consensus is that you're wasting the bottom insulation for the most part anyway, because you're crushing the loft. And the loft inside a down bag like this is what gives you that trapped airspace and insulative value of the material. If you're laying on top of it, you're not getting much out of it. So if you've got a good R value in your pad, you can sleep directly on the pad with this as an overquilt, get your feet trapped inside of something that's enclosed to keep them nice and warm, and then this can snap up at the top, just like this, and it's got a cinch cord on it, so you can almost mummy bag this thing if you want to around your head. And I bought a larger one on purpose, and I bought one that had more fill in it on purpose, and I bought one that was a lower degree than I thought I was going to need most of the time on purpose, because I wanted to make sure it was multifunctional. This thing weighs, I apologize because I don't remember, but I did weigh it for you. This thing weighs 1 pound, 13 ounces. So you're looking at a little less than 2 pounds for this quilt, okay? So if you combine that with a pad, like the one we're using in this example, you're looking at a 3 pound system that you're sleeping inside of, basically, and on top of. That's not bad, okay? And the reason that's not bad is because of the next piece of the puzzle with this system, which is really the other good thing about down is it compresses pretty small. So I can put this in a bag, squeeze it down in a waterproof bag, and really get it compressed so that it sits good in my bag, okay? In the bottom of my bag, and it doesn't take up a lot of room. And I put it in very first thing, because it's usually the last thing I'm going to pull out, and it is in a waterproof bag anyway, so I put it in first at the very bottom, just like that. All right, now Once we have that, now we have to talk about a tarp. And you can see we've got a tarp sitting here. And this is a Cuban fiber or Dyneema tarp. But this tarp weighs, excuse me again, I guess I should have all this stuff sitting in front of me or right off the top of my head, but I don't. But this tarp comes in at a really good weight. This tarp comes in at 9.9 ounces. Okay, so let's just look at this for a minute. Just for an example of how the weight adds up when we're putting this together, okay? We can imagine first that this pack is empty, so it weighs 2.5 pounds with nothing else in it. Once we put our shelter system in it, it can be anywhere from 5 probably to 8 pounds, depending on how we pack it. So in this configuration, if we put a 2-pound quilt in here, now we're up to basically 4.5 pounds. If we put a medium R value pad in here, we're going to be up to 5.5 pounds. And then if we put a full-on tent, 2-man tent in here, we're going to be at about 7 pounds ish. Okay, 7 pounds ish. If we take out the 0-degree bag and put in, or the 0-degree quilt and put in a 30-degree quilt, we cut 1 pound off of that. We're down to 6 pounds. If we add on the reverse end a higher R value pad like our X bed for colder temperatures, now we're sitting at about 8 pounds. So you've got some fluctuation there depending on the shelter that you use of about 3 pounds. But that's how quickly the weight can add up. And the difference between a warm weather shelter, which you could get away with almost nothing at that point, because you could go with the lightest quilt you had or even a Wooby and just some kind of a ground pad with a low R value and a very lightweight tarp, and you would end up, you know, way under probably 3 pounds at that point. So it really depends on what your shelter system is, where you're at. But if you look at 8 pounds is going to be the maximum my shelter is going to weigh, and use that as your basis to go off of, I'd say that's a pretty good starting point for me. So that leaves me to get to my 20, I can add 12 more pounds of stuff to this pack. And now I have to figure out where that 12 pounds is going to come from. Okay, guys, well, to tell you the truth, that was a lot more of a rambling video than I really wanted to shoot. But I wanted you to understand, number one, how quickly these weights can add up when you're going back and looking at Nessmuk's pack weights and things like that, how fast this stuff can add up even with the most modern lightweight materials you can get, and how to kind of adjust back and forth to get that weight where you want it, and why I'm concentrating first on the weight of those big 3 items, because those are where the maximum amount of weight I'm going to put in this pack, the bulk of the weight is going to come from. You know, I'm still, if I'm trying to strive for that 20 pounds and I can come in with this whole thing at 8, then less than half of the weight I want to carry is going to be my shelter system, and I planned on it being half. So that's pretty good. That's pretty good. And again, depending on the season, depending on the weather, I can adjust that way down from there, or I could probably bump it up just a little bit more if I needed to as well. Guys, I appreciate you joining me for this video today. I thank you for everything you do for our school, for our family, for our business, for all of our sponsors, instructors, affiliates, and friends. And I'll be back with another video in this series as soon as I can. Thanks, guys.